Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode of the Smart Economy Podcast, we were joined by Zac Williamson, the CEO and co-founder of Aztec, a privacy-focused L2 being built on top of Ethereum. In this conversation, we discussed the need for privacy in general and on-chain, Aztec as a privacy network to be built on top of multiple layer 1s, how the team built a programmable privacy tool and network, the need for decentralization in privacy-oriented networks, Aztec's upcoming mainnet launch, and much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the guest or host might hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can check out a disclaimer on www.neonewstoday.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't hesitate to rate and review it on your favorite podcasting platform, and also share it with your friends and family. Every rating, review, and comment helps us reach more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. With all that said, I really enjoyed speaking with Zac, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast. Today we're joined by Zac Williamson, the CEO and co-founder of Aztec, a privacy-first L2 built on Ethereum. How are you doing today, Zac?
Hi there, Dylan. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well. Life is good, new year, busy building. What more could anybody want?
New year, same us. I love it. This is going to be my 8th year in the blockchain and crypto space, and you're quite an OG yourself, building out since 2017. So I can't wait to dig further into, where you came from and why you're here and what you're building. But before we kind of start all that, I do kind of want to get like a high level perspective. And before we hit the record button, I was mentioning that I remember Vitalik in December 23, January 24, talking about this 2024 being the year that ZK kind of came to fruition. We saw a lot of mainnets launch. We saw Aztec release testnet and other tools and protocols. So do you share that sentiment that 2024 was the year that ZK finally became real for the blockchain space?
So I partially agree. I think there are some nuance here. First, let's take a step back. I've been doing this for 8 years now. And in 2017, zero-knowledge cryptography, ZK technology, was an extremely rare niche thing. It only had really been deployed into production in a meaningful way in Zcash, which was considered, which was considered this insane moon math by most people. It was completely not understandable. And now, flash forward 8 years. Now in 2024, you have the deployment of multiple ZK L2s. You have a vibrant ecosystem of off-chain ZK-based services that are adding value to blockchain, like SP1, like Risk Zero, where you can prove computations offline, put them on chain. And so I do think 2024 was a major year for ZK because it meant it made the technology exist. It was deployed into products and services that you could use in a quite a large way. I do think, however, that there is a long way to go. I'm very biased here because I'm the CEO of Aztec, and 2025 is the intended year that Aztec launches. So obviously, I think 2025 is the year, but there's a lot of difficulty in converting a technology solution into a product. And that was clearly shown in 2024. I think whilst there's been a lot of L2s deployed, ZK L2s, I don't believe any of them are decentralized, for example, and there are major obstacles present in doing that whilst maintaining the existing levels of liveness and transaction throughput. And obviously, the main thing for me is a lack of privacy. ZK is used for scaling, but it's also used for privacy, and only scaling was really meaningfully deployed in 2024.
Cool. So I want to dig a lot further into Aztec and kind of what you've been building since the conceptualization in 2017. But let's just get a little background on you. Like, what's your aha moment? When did you discover Bitcoin or Ethereum. You have a really cool background. You aren't a cryptographer or computer scientist by trade. So maybe you can share a little bit about your journey from physics to here as well.
Yeah, so I originally, in a past life, I did a PhD in particle physics on some giant experiment in Japan called Tokai to Kamioka. And I remember reading about Bitcoin when I was at university. And honestly, back then, my view of it was that of the unenlightened mainstream. It was, what is this silly magic internet money? It's, these are just magic beans. Nobody cares. It's pointless. And then over time, you get these articles going, oh, Bitcoin is worth $1. That's interesting. Bitcoin's worth $10. It's worth $100. Maybe I should get more involved in this Bitcoin thing. So it took a long time, really. I was a skeptic all the way up until 2017. When that was when I'd done my PhD, I'd crashed out of academia. Like, I had all these dreams of becoming a research scientist, trying to unpick the fabric of reality, but then actually trying to do that was a mildly traumatic experience, and I decided I was better off just being a software engineer. So, and then a friend of my brother's best friend, basically, a guy called Tom Pocock, he was wanted to do this technology startup on the Ethereum blockchain to do TradFi services, and he needed a technical co-founder. And I'm like, well, that seems, might as well. I wasn't doing anything interesting at the time, and that was really what, that was the kind of the aha moment for me, which was a bit different from others, I think. Which was when talking with Tom, I saw how you could use this distributed consensus network for to improve things in the real world, as in, instead of creating digital money, digital instruments, I saw how, you could actually, by creating digital records of things that are like things in the real world, and creating these services that trade and mediate them without intermediaries, without third parties, you could improve a lot of what already came before, which eventually led me around to the whole debanking, unbanked, decentralized banking thesis. And trying to replace money, trying to provide a lot more financial autonomy for individuals. But I came about it in a very roundabout way.
Yeah, you got brought in by actually working on a project. Our paths are kind of similar. I won't claim to be as intelligent as you were digging into physics and getting a PhD, but I too became disillusioned with my previous career. I was an urban planner doing city planning, and just lost the zest and the zeal after studying in school and then going into the real world and seeing how terrible it is to work for bureaucratic agencies. The disillusionment came quickly. And so 2017 was kind of like my aha year as well, where I started seeing sugar plums and fairies when it came to the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum and where we could go. Went full time in 2018, and that was a rude awakening, kind of building in a bear for my first time. So what was your perspective then in 2017? You started working on a traditional financial tool product on top of a distributed ledger. So is this where you kind of became aware of the issues of privacy? And maybe you can even share a little bit about what the perspectives of on-chain privacy even were in 2017. Was it a thought? Were people even considering the potential issues that came with transactions and being able to follow it and track them?
I think back then the ecosystem was very, very immature. I mean, one could argue it still is immature relative to what it's going to be. But particularly back then, I wasn't aware of privacy really being much of a concern or a consideration. Typically, if you're building a project in 2017, you're doing something with DeFi, maybe you're doing something like MakerDAO. Well, you don't really care if it's not private, because everybody is just a random on-chain pseudonym. Your OXF3 QQ whatever, and that's not really linked to you in any meaningful way. And so, who cares about privacy? For us, it was a bit different because we were trying to use this technology to remove a bunch of middlemen in an existing industry, and we were trying to create these services that would manage multi-billion-dollar portfolios where you just can't put that kind of information on chain, where the information required to trade these assets was proprietary. So for us, it was a bit of a rude awakening. Back then, I was very naive about privacy. I thought, surely if you just take your transactions and split them into small notionals, and then just like send them around lots of different addresses and then combine them. Surely it'll be fine. Surely nobody can tell what's going on. And in the winter of 2017, I realized, oh no, that's not how this works. We have a real problem on our hands. And yeah, how the hell do you get transaction privacy in a network where the basic guarantee that is that everybody can view every transaction and therefore know it's legit? That's what led me into zero knowledge cryptography and that research pathway.
So you're working on Aztec now, and I don't want to put words in your mouth for what happened with the project back then and why you're not working on the same project that you started with Tom. But were you guys coming up to the institutions, the traditional guys, when you were trying to create these disintermediating services? Is that why you're kind of where you're at now and not still working on your original project that brought you into the space?
Well, I think if we'd ground away that we might have managed to get something working. But it was tough, Like I remember me and like co-founders, putting on suits and ties, going into the city of London and trying to like demo this little deal platform we had called Credit Desk, to a bunch of suits who, barely knew how to turn on the computer. And it was a lot got lost in translation. I think we got this reader working that actually getting these people to sign up to this bleeding edge technology solution, even if it would save them a lot of money, would be very hard to do. But that wasn't really the main thrust. The main thrust was, I'd done a bunch of cryptography research to try and solve this privacy problem, and managed to, with a lot of help, succeed in creating a ZK protocol that enabled this our startup called Credit Mint to get transaction privacy. But with this tool, this technology, we were like, wow, this is a big deal. In doing that research, I got massively pulled into privacy. The idea of combining, computational confidential information, having confidential data on the blockchain, but still gaining all the benefits of decentralization and distributed networks. Just seeing what you could create with that technology was so powerful, was so captivating. For us, it was a bit of a no-brainer that we needed to pivot into providing this technology as an infrastructure solution for everybody instead of just one specific product. So yeah, it was just, I guess you could say I got privacy pilled.
You're going around as a monkey in a suit, realizing that the people you're trying to pitch to aren't quite getting it. And you've also privacy pilled yourself, trying to figure out these ZK solutions and build out ZK architecture, infrastructure. And so, clearly the disintermediation service doesn't quite work out. And the beginning of Aztec is founded. So what was it like in 2018 then? How did you find your founders? How did you conceptualize, ideate what you're going to start working on? What were kind of like the beginnings? What was the seed of Aztec then?
Well, the beginnings of Aztec were Credit Mint. I mean, it was the same organization, same founders, same people. So we'd already got our team, like our founding team together. So it was me, it was Tom, and Joe Andrews, who is my current co-founder, and Arno Schenk. So we were kind of a four of us. We met Joe and Arno on a startup accelerator called Entrepreneur First in 2017. We'd all joined forces. And so that, I guess the process of pivoting was basically just us just talking a lot amongst each other, going like, how are we going to get this working? Can we do something with that's more general than this Credit Mint idea? So basically we decided in 2018, okay, well, instead of doing this syndicated loan thing, which has a lot of different actors in it, which is where we have to get, buy-in from a lot of people who are technologically skeptical, let's try and create shielded assets on Ethereum instead. Let's do that, because that's valuable, that's interesting. And then we could, because the tricky thing is, once we started pivoting, the goal from that point onwards was always programmable privacy, basically creating that smart contract ecosystem that Ethereum enables, but where you have strong privacy guarantees, you have private state, you can hide your identity, you can put confidential data on chain that you can use to prove things about yourself, about, things in the real world. That was always the goal, but we knew that the tech we had at the time was primitive and not capable of doing that. So the question on our mind was, okay, well, if we can get there in the long term, how do we demonstrate value today? So that we can have an opportunity really to iterate on this technology and improve it over time without running out of money. And so the plan was then, let's create, it's called Aztec 1.0. It was a basic privacy shield for Ethereum with some very limited programmability in what a shielded transaction was. And yeah, we set about doing that middle of 2018, got it working, I believe, at I think it was either the end of 2019 or the start of 2020.
So maybe we can, like a high level philosophical question, and maybe you have like a really nice canned response for this, but why wasn't privacy or privacy like tools, why aren't these embedded natively into blockchain networks?
Why are they embedded? Because they're hard, because they're bloody nightmarish to build. I think that like with Aztec, we're now in 2025 deploying build like our network. We should have testnet imminently where you can create a smart contract where you can have private data and you can create transactions and basically have all the mod cons of a normal blockchain. But it took us eight-ish years to get there, and required a lot of technological innovation, like including original research. It's not just that we were taking research and turning it into code. We were doing the research, like we were like crafting our own mathematics and then turning it into papers, turning it into code. It's bloody hard. I mean, privacy has always been on the roadmap of ideas. You can go back into the internet archives and see how Finney talking about zero knowledge and talking about privacy and how important it was. But it was always one of these things where we'll add it later because we don't really know how to do it. And now we do, more or less. But it's still a very immature technology compared to distributed consensus protocols.
So you mentioned Hal Finney. Maybe this is a nice opportunity for how you can kind of shill how Aztec is keeping crypto and blockchain cypherpunk.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. So I think without privacy, we're building a dystopia right now with Web3, because we're basically creating a warrantless financial surveillance regime. Now, it's all fun and games while we're trading around tokens and we're all just internet avatars, and it's all a bit virtual. But it doesn't take much for all this tech to be packaged up in a bow and then sold off to a central bank or national government. And now you have a digital transaction ledger that everybody has to use, every business has to use, that can be viewed by the state, and you no longer have financial privacy. Like, I think genuinely that there is a huge incentive for state bureaucracies to try to remove financial privacy, just because of pure incentive alignment. Like the less physical cash in your system, the easier it is to understand what your economy, to acquire legibility about what your citizens are doing, and therefore how to structure your economy, also prevent tax evasion. And this has the minor issue of crushing what I would view as personal liberty, because I think that money is an expression of human agency and therefore freedom. You can get people to do things that you want to do and they don't want to do if you pay them. You can buy material goods that allow you to express yourself through money. Through the clothes that you buy and wear, through the consumer goods that you have. I do believe that money is a form of speech, and it is a fundamental human. Like, I wouldn't even say it's not just a right; it's a need to be able to have privacy with respect to one's finances. And without privacy, we're building technology which undermines all of this. It undermines. It's not just not cypherpunk. It's the complete antithesis of cypherpunk. And we're all kind of a little bit willfully ignorant of this fact, I think, because everyone's having a lot of fun, everybody's making money. I don't think anybody's thinking too much about the long term here, and it's deeply troubling.
Yeah, I think when we look at just like the history of Bitcoin and Ethereum and cryptocurrencies, there's that kind of, I think it was Gandhi who said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And I think just broadly speaking at a global level right now, we're in the then they fight you stage for the survival of these networks and these new forms of monies that we're trying to embed into the day-to-day lives of us and the unbanked. So we have this kind of like overarching thing that's happening to our industry. But then, as you just mentioned, governments want to be able, not even governments, just the state in general wants to be able to monitor transactions that occur. And so privacy might even have, and privacy builders and privacy tools might even have more of a magnifying glass over them. So do you feel that working and building on Aztec. Do you have to fight these narratives more, like when folks are saying privacy is for criminals? Why do you have to hide what you're doing unless you're doing something wrong? Do you feel like there's a stronger or more of a force of a boot on your neck? Or is this all just kind of like part of the same umbrella?
It's very complicated. It is partially part of the same umbrella, but also there are different strengths and weaknesses. For example, like the typical anti-privacy narratives of, oh, I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to fear. Well, it's not just blockchain privacy, which experiences this. Like as a society, we have had this like very long discourse about the tension between liberty and safety for hundreds of years, where you cannot have liberty without privacy, and you cannot have perfect safety without full transparency. And I think that our societies are comfortable with this, existing with this tension, and that many precedents have been set that privacy is important. It's enshrined in the European Convention of Human Rights, the right to a private life. It's with the establishment of the internet, like there were some very strong principles that were set that the internet should be a neutral network. Like the government is not going to hold an ISP responsible for the content going through their fiber optic cables. It's the producer and the consumer that are responsible and are the regulated entities. Similarly, DNS signers need to be neutral. Decentralized networks need to be neutral. And so these principles have not yet been adapted to blockchain, but they will be, because it's the same fundamental concept. It's just going to take a bit of time and a lot of grinding at the coalface. And certainly there's going to be a lot of collateral damage, because there will be entities out there which will want to undermine these principles. In the same way that you have entities, you have politicians, you have bureaucrats that are trying to ban encryption in the UK and the EU because under the guise of safety and protection, despite them themselves using encrypted messaging apps to avoid scrutiny from the media. It'll take time, but I feel like the values and necessity of privacy is well established outside of the blockchain sphere, and that's not really the case with distributed networks in general, as in with internet currencies. So I am very bullish on the long term for privacy, particularly when its advantages and values are firmly demonstrated, which I think we're going to be doing with Aztec. But it's going to be a long grind for sure.
So then maybe we can use this as an opportunity for you to just kind of give your quick 30-second elevator pitch for Aztec. And what would you say that Aztec's primary focus is? Is it shielded transactions? Is it a plethora of privacy tools for Ethereum? How would you put it?
So we're a network. We are enabling privacy for the entire blockchain ecosystem, starting with Ethereum, going to be the whole blockchain ecosystem, where the value is far beyond things like asset obfuscation or the typical use cases of privacy today. For me, privacy is intrinsically linked with identity. If you want to do things on chain that affect what happens off chain, then you need to provide a link between your cryptocurrency account and your identity in the real world. Being able to link who you are in the real world and who you are on chain right now requires either third-party middlemen or an unacceptable amount of data, like data leaking. And Aztec solves this, basically. You can put encrypted credentials on chain so that you can do things like sign in with your Google account, and nobody knows that you've linked your cryptocurrency account to your Google account, except maybe Google, or sign in with Apple ID. You can do things like proofs of passport or proofs of bank accounts, where you can prove not just to a third party, you can prove to a contract, to a smart contract, and nobody else, that you are a citizen of a certain country or you possess a bank account from a certain region. And using these primitives, you can start to create really strong, permissionless, distributed identity protocols that you can use to massively add value into the blockchain network. The reason why the blockchain has not touched the real world in a meaningful way and touched the mainstream is because of a lack of privacy, because privacy is linked to identity. There's a reason why blockchain infrastructure is not some base layer that all financial apps use. There's a reason why when your grandparents are using some app on their phone or they're performing a payment, that's not happening under the hood through some kind of blockchain infrastructure. And that reason is a lack of privacy. You fix privacy, combined with scaling, you change the world, in my opinion. You change the world because you change what money is. It changes how we interact with money. It changes like how we can create financial services. It massively liberates the entire space and makes it much, much easier to provide competing and compelling financial services, not just to people in the developed world, but the developing world. You can provide strong guarantees around what's happening with your money to people in the developing world who don't live in a society with any strong rule of law. And this kind of stuff is really revolutionary when fully expressed, and that's what we want to enable with Aztec. We want people to come into our network and build whatever they want, to serve their business, to serve their project, to serve their hobbies, and give them the tools to fully express themselves on chain.
What acts as more of a catalyst for the integration of more robust privacy tools? Is it the individual, or is it like the group, the institution? And I have this thought experiment quite often with one of my buddies here. It's surprising to me that most people don't get up in arms when they go to a bar and they have to show their ID to prove they're 21, because we're also showing the bartender and the bouncer where I live. Why would I want to share my address with a complete stranger? But we do this every day and we don't even think twice about it. For privacy to become more of an embedded concern in our society, you would have to think that maybe the individual would have to get concerned about this first. So this goes back to my question: how do we catalyze more privacy tools? Do we have to have the individual rise up, or does it come more from the top down, an umbrella of institutions and large scale entities?
It's a very good question. So the naive thought is it can't come from the individual because the individual doesn't care about privacy. This is the lived experience of everybody right now. As much as I wish we lived in a society where people cared about privacy deeply, they don't. There's the typical revenue models for pretty much every online service is mass data surveillance and information harvesting about who you are. There's probably a few AI algorithms kicking around the world that know more about me than I do. And so one would think, okay, well, people can't pay for privacy. People that care about privacy, they're not going to pay for it. Therefore, it has to come from institutions. But let's take it a little deeper, because privacy is a spectrum, and at some point, people do care. And it's all about demonstrating value. Let me give you an example. If there was an ATM that, when you used it, screamed out to the entire street how much money was in your bank account, would you use that ATM? Or would you be willing to walk 1 minute around the block and use one that actually didn't do that? How many people listening to this podcast episode will be comfortable going on Twitter and tweeting out to the world what their salary was, or the size of their mortgage, or the size of their debts? People care about privacy in that regard. And so there's a balance here. Mm-hmm. People care a lot about financial privacy. They don't care so much about privacy around their other not like information that they don't consider monetizable, but advertisers certainly do. And so the way that I think this space is going to succeed, where privacy is going to become a big deal, is by enabling decentralized networks to carry services and products that users traditionally expect privacy from. I think that for example, if a successful micropayments network is ever going to take off on chain, I expect it to carry some financial privacy requirements. If you have on-chain lending that's linked to anything in the real world, that's going to come with privacy requirements. I think if you do income streaming in a meaningful way that really takes off, that's going to have privacy requirements. And so I think financial privacy is the first thing that's important. I also think that, sorry, it's a bit of a long answer. There is something subtle about ZK and privacy, which it enables something which isn't possible previously. And that's this concept of extracting information from data modes. What do I mean by that? So there are a lot of online services these days that their monetization model is they'll use information harvesting, advertising, and they will basically collect data about you that they will keep to themselves. Take Facebook, for example. Now, let's say you want to create a rival network, and you want to, in order to onboard users efficiently, you wanted to take all the data that Facebook has about a user and move it to your app. Well, right now you can't, because if you ask Facebook, they'll tell you to jog on. But with ZK, you can enable these trustless oracles where you can have users prove data provenance. I can basically go to a third-party service and say, here is what Facebook is saying about me, and I can prove it's true through things like ZK TLS. And so what privacy can also enable is this level, is it sort of a kind of adds forced composability between Web 2 services that don't want to be composable. And that doesn't really fit into the privacy spectrum here, like individuals and institutions. But it's still a very important value add that isn't yet really fully, I wasn't going to say isn't fully explored, hasn't been explored at all yet. But it's going to become a big thing in the next 5 years.
So if this is going to become kind of like a large scale problem that gets tackled, and it's going to become more and more integrated into Web 2, traditional like services, why didn't Aztec kind of build a layer one? Why is Aztec building on top of Ethereum? If we want to make it easy for an institution to onboard privacy tools and privacy solutions, why do we also ask them to understand like a base layer of Ethereum? And then additionally, what Aztec is doing, why not just create an L1 and get rid of kind of like some of the explanations that it takes to onboard like a new large scale entity?
Well, the first thing is I would disagree that it requires like this additional kind of like contextual knowledge, because I expect basically this to be abstracted away longer term. Whether you're using an L1 or an L2, even an L3 or L whatever, that the tooling and technology stack will basically, it'll just look like a network. Like for example, if I'm a user, if I'm some random person who's turned up and I'm like, I want to do blockchain stuff, right? And I create a wallet and I want to send stuff around. If I'm transacting on Arbitrum or on Ethereum or on Solana, like it kind of all looks the same to me. The reason why we picked Ethereum is because Ethereum is where the liquidity is. It's where the money is. And privacy is not useful without liquidity. Unfortunately, Zcash showed this. Like, nobody cares about how many magic beans you have. Therefore, you don't need to keep private how many magic beans you have. But if you have, a multi-million-dollar USDC portfolio, well, that's something different, right? Like when if you have websites tracking whales and where where people get alerts whenever you send money around, like that is important. Privacy is only important if there's money at stake. Ethereum is where all the money is, so we want to be as close to the source of value as we can get, which for Aztec is a layer 2.
Mm-hmm. And so will Aztec ultimately become a multi-chain solution?
Yes. It's inevitable. We want to basically, the first goal is get Aztec working, get to mainnet. But then after that, we want to create what I guess one could call an Aztec stack, where we enable effectively privacy shields for every single chain that's compatible with our tech. So, it could be an L1, it could be an L2, it could be an L3. But we always expect to use Ethereum as the fundamental consensus layer. We'd rather not build a consensus network. Ethereum's done that already. So we'd like to use Ethereum for consensus. But ultimately, we want very efficient bridging between, say, portals, Aztec portals on Arbitrum, on Solana, on wherever, so that everybody's interacting on the Aztec network with a single shielded pool of assets, but they're coming from multiple different sources.
Can we take a step back maybe and talk about the different iterations of Aztec dating back to 2019? You mentioned earlier in our conversation that the first kind of instance of Aztec being live was a very simple shielded transaction. And over the years, you've been able to build and iterate upon that, and there have been multiple versions of Aztec. So maybe you can just kind of walk us through what like the major launches have been and the major milestones.
Totally, yes. This is technically the fourth iteration of Aztec, really. So Aztec 1 was late 2019, 2020, where it wasn't a rollup. So every transaction was verified on Ethereum. It was incredibly expensive, and you could shield tokens, like any ERC20 token, send it around privately. You could do basic things like ratio checks. So you could do like swaps of different currencies at certain ratios to do basic trading. But you only had data privacy. You didn't have user privacy. So people could see who was interacting, but just not the values. So it was a pretty primitive thing, especially by modern standards. But at the time, it was it wasn't that. It was pretty revolutionary. I think it was the first shielding protocol for Ethereum. But then in 2019, that's when I with Ariel Gabazon, we developed Plonk, which is this ZK snark, which enabled much more advanced stuff. So we were like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's make a roll-up so that you don't just have private transactions on Ethereum, but they're also cheap. And so that became Aztec 2, which got launched in 2021, I think. My memory is blurs these days. It's I'd have to check the press releases, but I think it was 2021. And that was maybe 2020. It was a few years ago. And that was the first private roll-up ever. Again, we had to solve a lot of very original problems to get that system working. And so then there you could have like relatively cheap shielded transfers on Ethereum. We then evolved that into something we called Aztec Connect, which didn't just do shielded transfers, but also enabled DeFi type activities. So back then we still couldn't enable full programmability. The tech wasn't that advanced. We had Plonk, we had ZK snarks, but we were missing a few components that we needed to really pull it off. So we were like, okay, what's the best we can do? Well, if we can't do programmability, what about if from our L2, it's very easy to talk anonymously to L1 apps. So say I can shield some tokens, some ETH into Aztec, and then I can get the Aztec network to proxy a transaction on L1 to swap that ETH to DAI in something like Uniswap. And so the idea there would be the identities of the user would be hidden because Aztec would effectively be acting on your behalf. And that was something we were very proud of. That was Aztec Connect, and that was 2022. But it had several flaws. The main one being that it was very hard to develop for because you didn't have programmability. You had a lot of like very complicated software stack to use. And again, part of it is because we were doing it for the first time. We had to figure everything out for the first time when it comes to these shielded proxy transfers. And so when 2023 rolls around, that's when there's been enough advances and iterations that we can finally, we have confidence we can do the real thing now. We can actually make a programmable private smart contract network. And we made the hard decision to kill Aztec Connect because we would have, the work that we would have to put into it to make it robust, to make it fully decentralized, would have consumed the company's efforts. And we really needed to focus our resources on the real deal. So that's then what internally we were calling Aztec 3, which we then decided to drop 3. That's now Aztec, and that's the network where we've built out our developer network. We're turning that into a full public testnet, and we should have mainnets this year.
So DevNet went live in August last year, correct? So encapsulated in DevNet is a toolkit, a quite robust toolkit. There's SDKs. There's a brand new programming language that you guys created, Noor, in order to embed private smart contract functionality. So maybe you can share a little bit about what the considerations were that went into building Noor. Why did you have to create a new Rust-based language as opposed to using Solidity, something that all Web3 devs inherently know? And why was this kind of a base for what empowers DevNet and eventually will mainnet?
Totally. So the main reason why we went with our own DSL is because privacy changes a lot about the transaction model on a blockchain network. If you think about Solidity is a programming language for the Ethereum virtual machine, which is fully transparent. But adding privacy into a blockchain isn't just a case of like throwing a ZK snark on top of it and going, ta-da, it's private. You have to radically change the state model of your blockchain. And what do I mean by that? I mean that for one thing, Aztec's private state, it's UTXO based, like Bitcoin is not account based, because if you have an account, if you have an encrypted account on a network like Ethereum, okay, so now nobody can see your account balance. But if 100 people send you money, then you will see one encrypted account balance change for each transaction. So that information basically leaks the transaction graph. So actually managing like private state updates in a way that's not really, really complicated and difficult required us to build our own custom abstraction layers around it. And for that, we needed our own language. We needed our own language so that the language could reflect the kind of the semantics of private state transitions in a way that you can't do with something like Solidity, unless you add so much stuff on top of it that it looks like a different language. The other consideration was we are quite resource constrained with Aztec because if you're constructing zero-knowledge proofs of your transactions, and those transactions are supposed to be private, that means they contain secrets that you don't want to leak, which means you ideally make the proof yourself on your own hardware, which is typically not very good. All the existing ZK outfits, right? They prove their transactions in a large centralized compute cluster because, well, they can, and that's what you do if you can, because it's fast. We don't have that luxury, which means that the ZK circuits that our language produces have to be relatively efficient. If we were to, snarkify a Solidity virtual, like an Ethereum virtual machine or a Solidity emulator, that adds a lot of overheads, which means that then you wouldn't really be able to make a proof of that transaction on a laptop in a web browser, particularly if that laptop is old or using an old phone. But with Aztec and Noir, you can. Because we designed the language from the ground up to be really efficient for this client-side proving environment. And so those two things combined are really why we needed our own language.
So what have you learned then since DevNet went live 5 months ago now? And what are some of the results you've seen from the alpha build? Yeah,
totally. So we've seen some amazing stuff from the alpha builds, like some really, really impressive projects coming out of it. One of the things that was very validating was just seeing the amount of interest in it that people put into Noir. I think for 2 years in a row, we're one of Web3's fastest growing developer ecosystems, and we're not even live. And it's because of Noir. It's because you can use Noir in products and services that have nothing to do with Aztec, and that's something fundamentally new. You're seeing this for example with things like ZK Passports, which is a team I'm very fond of. They're doing something really important where you can basically, they have an app where you can just tap your passport to your phone. Your passport has there's a chip in it that will send a digital signature, and you can make proofs on your phone that selectively disclose information about your passport. So you can prove that you're a citizen of a country without revealing anything else, or prove your age without revealing anything else. Another one is, we've seen some amazing wallets coming out of that alpha build. ZK Email, for example, now has a Noir integration, which is the best for client-side proving, which we're really fond of. But I think the app that I think is really demonstrates privacy in a very tangible way to people is Anoncast, which is built with Noir, where Anoncast allows you to post on social media anonymously. You prove to you provide a proof that you possess an account, that you possess and you possess some Anoncast tokens, and then the Anoncast account will tweet on your behalf. It allows for anonymous social media posting. It's genius. I wish I'd thought of it. in terms of what we'd learned, yeah, we learned people are interested in what we're doing, which is really good. We learned that we had a lot of work to do in terms of performance, robustness, stability. The language is now a much better language than it was in August, very robust. And we also learned a few things like decentralization is hard. Because our definition is not decentralized, it just runs locally on a developer's machine. But for mainnet, we need to be fully decentralized from day one. Like that's non-negotiable for us. And so we also want our testnet to be decentralized. And let me tell you, there's a reason why all the other L2s aren't bothering to decentralize. But we're getting there. We're almost there now.
I hope this isn't this question isn't putting you into too much of a spicy position. But when you look at like Mina, it's a ZK-L1, and a lot of the development that's going on there, from my perspective, the outsider looking in, a lot of those dApps are stuck in that ecosystem. And so with a lot of the tools that are coming out with Alpha Build, do you think that poises the developers that are building on Aztec with maybe a better opportunity to share their tools and their products with people outside the ZK privacy realm, because you are an L2 that you can more easily implement and integrate with users that are familiar with other networks?
Yeah, I do think there is that advantage. I mean, I think, I don't want to throw shade on Mina, because they're real trailblazers in what they've been doing. And anyone working on privacy tech is one of the good guys, in my opinion. They're also live on mainnet, we're not. So, I'd be in a glass house throwing rocks if I was criticizing them. I do think that the choice of being an L1 did limit them a little bit. I also think that with Aztec, we made a very conscious choice to create a language, Noir, to program our contracts. And we made a very conscious choice that language needed to be more than just an Aztec network tool. It needed to be a general purpose language for private programs for ZK, because then you just get this very positive network effect, right? Where people come to your ecosystem because they have their own things they want to do. They don't care about Aztec, but you're providing something. They're providing Noir that they need. They then use Noir. They create libraries for Noir, which will enhance the capability of all the Aztec applications. And also they provide scrutiny, they improve, because Noir is open source, you'll get pull requests into the repository, which improve it as a language. You'll get feedback. You'll get all this useful stuff. And so certainly the pull of Noir, and therefore by extension Aztec, is much larger as a result than it would be if we had a bespoke way of coding up Aztec contracts that wasn't generic or extendable. I think Noir is a key product in the Aztec lineup, and essential in my opinion, for our success as a network.
Yeah, I mean, just being an L2 and being able to build on top of other L1s and having your own smart contract makes it very possible for anyone to kind of build within an ecosystem in which they're already familiar. So what were some of the responses you received from your testnet devs so far? Were they able to kind of pick up the ball with Noir and start going? Was there a lot of friction in learning the new language? Was it intuitive for the developers that are building in your ecosystem?
I think, there was very little friction in picking up the language because of the design decisions we made going into it. It's based heavily on Rust. So if you have you don't need Rust programming experience. I'm not much of a Rust developer myself, and I like to think I'm pretty good at Noir. Just having general programming knowledge will give you what you need to pick it up. It's the feedback we've got from it is very intuitive, and empowering, because people don't need there's this current view right in Web3 that you need to be this kind of the specialist individual to be able to program with privacy or do ZK stuff, and that's not true with Noir. I guess when it comes to things like our early access testnet, things like that, I mean, the learnings we're having are much more around the network architecture and the network infra layer, and basically just fixing all the teething problems that come up when you're creating something from scratch, and improving the reliability of our sequencing network so we can maintain decent TPS throughputs. But that's all. Yeah, it's all been a very valuable learning experience for us.
Will Aztec's sequencer network be decentralized on launch of mainnet?
Yes, it'll be decentralized and launch testnet. Never mind mainnet. Yeah, because for us, there's a couple of things. We don't just want to launch decentralized. We need to launch decentralized because Aztec network needs to be like the internet, as in a fully distributed network that no one entity has control of. Otherwise, because Aztec's position really is like we want to enable the tools, the services, the software, the libraries for people to build applications on Aztec that are compliant in whatever jurisdiction they're in. But that we want to make it possible for them to be compliant, but that the network itself is a neutral entity, and that the site of regulation is at the application level. This argument does not work, if you have an entity that controls the Aztec network, because then the network itself is an application. If the internet was like a server room in California, right? Like whoever controlled that server would probably have a few governments talking to them. And so I think Aztec is quite fundamentally aligned with the values and ethos of Web3, because of the raw incentives. The other L2s out there, the transparent ones, they don't really have incentives to decentralize because their users don't really care. And decentralizing will make their transactions more expensive, make their TPS rates drop, and given that transaction costs and TPS is their main competitive advantage, they're not going to do that. But for us, it's different, very different. But also, outside of that issue, we want to address a few missteps we think that have happened in L2 launches or just Web3 launches generally, which is that typically a lot of projects when they launch, the tokens are heavily controlled by insiders, and they make claim to be decentralized, but in reality they're not, just because of those proportions, those thresholds. We want our sequencers to be partners in the deployment of the Aztec network. We want to make sure that enough of the network is the control of the network is distributed to as many actors as possible, so that we're not just decentralized on paper, but actually we are decentralized. If me as the founder or co-founder of Aztec wants something to happen on the network, I've got to convince the community. I can't just do it. For me, that's really important.
So then, other than worrying about the architecture and the infrastructure and making it as a public good, a service that anyone can use, and it's the front end that has to worry if they're achieving jurisdictional or regulatory compliance, are there any other considerations that Aztec needs to take into mind when it comes to jurisdictional compliance when you guys are building? Or is it simply the perspective that if we build the architecture right, then it will be a neutral place and we as a foundation won't have to worry about X, Y, or Z?
We have a North Star at Aztec which guides us, which is it's about moral legitimacy. I think it's we want to ensure that as a user of the Aztec network, you can distinguish yourself from any bad actor. We don't want people don't want people to, through as a consequence of interacting with the Aztec network, know that they are we don't want them to be able to assist nefarious actors by helping them hide their transactions. And so we want to ensure that there's a very robust suite of software libraries and tools that can be used by Aztec developers to protect users in that regard. Which with Aztec's advanced programmability is a heck of a lot easier than one would think. Things like ZK Passport are just the tip of the iceberg. But we want to make sure that those tools and software exist and are promoted as standards by the community. And we'll do what we can in terms of publicizing and that to make that happen. But ultimately, it's in the community's hands.
Yeah, and so in the past couple of years, we've seen some attacks on privacy-preserving technology from different regulatory entities around the world. We saw Tornado Cash kind of, become a code non grata here in the US. We've seen CoinJoin services become code non grata, even wallets like Samurai Wallet shutter down access to US-based residents. So do these kind of attacks on privacy-preserving technologies, do they change the way in which you operate, or is the North Star kind of the same since 2018, 2019, and you just keep moving along the path that the North Star guides you?
The North Star has always been the same, to be honest. But Aztec is like Aztec is a network, not an application. I think this is the important distinguisher. Like what's missing right now is clearly demonstrating the value of privacy. Outside of token mixing, like using privacy as a necessary component to provide meaningful services. So, for example, doing things like validating parts of your identity, or validating maybe you've gone through a Coinbase ID procedure, or using it in terms of on-chain games where that game cannot exist without privacy. Using privacy as a component in more complicated products and services, to me is necessary because when Aztec launches, we have to very quickly establish that this is a lot more than what's come before. But that's on us to do, As for the North Star, that's never changed. It's just the way it is. We've got to deal with the world as it comes to us.
So 2025 is going to be a big year for Aztec. What's kind of the milestone achievement? When will you know that mainnet is ready? Mainnet, the launch was successful. Is it just going to be, the decentralized network launching on day one and continuing to churn block after block? Is it going to be a number of users that start to access the network? Is it going to be a number of dApps that start building on top of Aztec? What's kind of like the marker that you guys are going to use for the successes that you achieved this year?
We have many. We have a multi-tiered roadmap, where obviously the first major milestone is can we deploy a network that produces blocks? Then can contracts be deployed to that network? Can we sustain certain TPS thresholds? What's the block uptime percentage? There's launching is just the start. It's not the end. It's the end of the beginning. So from after launch, we still have a mission, which is to always improve the stability of the network, the security of the network, the throughput of the network, ensuring that adding to its technological competences so that it can handle more advanced use cases. This is going to be an ongoing project that lasts for many, many years. We're just hopefully this year we're just firing the starting gun.
And so if I could make you take off your Aztec hat for a second, but keep on your ZK hat, if there's one kind of trend that you expect to play out with zero knowledge technology in 2025, whether Aztec builds it or not, what would you say that is?
The trend, I don't know how much I'm taking my hat off here. I think the trend is privacy. 2024 was a year of scaling and scaling for ZK. 2025 is a year for privacy. Took us a bit of time to catch up because it's a lot more complicated, but once people see what you can do with private distributed technologies, it's going to blow their minds. It's going to absolutely blow their minds.
Awesome. If anybody was listening to this episode and wants to reach out to you, who do you want to talk to, and what's the best way that they can contact you?
What's the best way you can contact us? Well, we have a website, Aztec.network, and on that website we have links to our Discord, which is likely the best way to get in touch. We also have Twitter accounts, and we also have a forum where we discuss kind of more technical things because we try to build in the open. So, where we're discussing our architecture ideas, making requests for proposals and comments from the community. Aztec.network is the first place to go for sure.
I also want to let you know that I watched your talk at ZK12, and you showed a roadmap on the slide, and you also showed a link to the roadmap and said that you don't know anyone who's ever gone to a link that they've seen on a PowerPoint, but I actually did. I typed in the link from the PowerPoint, so...
Oh, you've warmed my heart. Thank you so much. That is wonderful to hear. Thank you. I will change what I say from now on. I will say that I only know one person who's ever followed a link on a slide.
Well, I'm absolutely honored. Zac, it was phenomenal to chat with you today. I personally know a builder or two here in Colorado who have built on top of Aztec in the past year or so. So it was nice to finally be able to meet one of the folks tasked with heading the network.
Thank you.
And I wish you nothing but the best of luck and your team in continuing to build out mainnet. And as a Web3 user and just a human in general, I cannot wait to have more privacy tools and solutions to help keep me safe online. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Much appreciated. And yeah, stay tuned for when we launch. Thank you.
Amazing. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please show your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcasting platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and bring even better content your way. We'd also love to hear from you. So please drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube to share what topics you'd like us to cover or who you'd like to see as our next guest. And if you know someone who would make a great guest, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always looking for fresh voices and new perspectives. For our NEO token holders, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Smart Economy podcast, and we can't wait to catch you next time.